Hi, I am Harley Valentine. On behalf of Castle Point, we welcome you to the Community Meeting number 1 for the Woolverton. In the following slides, we will be presenting our preliminary concept plan for the adaptive reuse and redevelopment of 13 Mountain and 19 Elm Street. As someone who has deep roots in Grimsby, I'm personally excited to work with you on this landmark project. This presentation has been assembled for community review. Our team is working towards a formal application with the town of Grimsby, and we look forward to your feedback before we make our submission. Your feedback will be used to inform the design of the Woolverton. Castle Point Numa. Founded in 1988, Castle Point Numa is a values-based development company that places community building, sustainability, and design excellence central to all our projects. Castle Point excels in heritage preservation and adaptive reuse, downtown revitalization, and mixed-use development. Today, I'm joined by the Woolverton's design and planning team. Drew Sinclair, award-winning architect at SVN, and Emma West, a principal at the preeminent community planning firm Bousfields. The following development principles guide our concept plan for the Woolverton. Investing in the site and neighborhood and fostering a unique ecosystem of tenants. Connecting to local community, building strategic partnerships with the Grimsby Benevolent Fund. Design excellence from the ground up. And responding to context and playing a unique role as both a gateway and a landmark to downtown Grimsby. The Woolverton site sits on the corner of Mountain and Elm Street in downtown Grimsby. At 13 Mountain Street, the 2-story red brick Woolverton house, and 19 Elm, the cathedral vaulted peach brick Woolverton Hall.
I am Emma West, a partner at Bousfields, a planning and urban design consulting firm working with the team on this application. I'm going to provide an overview of the policy and regulatory context as it applies to the site. The proposed development is generally consistent with the town's official plan. The official plan is a policy document that establishes the vision and objectives for how land is used and provides direction on how and where growth will occur in the town. The official plan designates the properties as commercial core intensification and downtown intensification. The proposed development implements the town's vision for these lands, and you will have heard the development principles for this project described to you. And when you compare those development principles and you look at the vision and objectives in the official plan for how growth will occur within the town and specifically within the downtown, there's great alignment between those development principles and the official plan vision and objectives. We're seeking an official plan amendment to address built form policies. But you will understand that significant intensification and a mix of uses are permitted, and that's a part of the vision for the downtown area, and specifically lands within downtown intensification and community core intensification lands. Therefore, the proposal for this development is generally consistent with the official plan. Zoning bylaws implement the broader policies set out in the official plan and provide specific criteria regarding the development context, such as permitted uses, built form, density, parking, and phasing. The properties are zoned downtown intensification, and the proposal is generally consistent with the intent of the zoning bylaw, but will require some modifications. The first application of the redevelopment process will be a combined official plan amendment and rezoning application. A rezoning application is also referred to as a zoning bylaw amendment application. The official plan amendment will introduce limited changes to the policies, primarily permission for minor increases in height, and the zoning bylaw amendment will introduce changes to the existing zoning regulations. It's important to understand that matters such as building design details, including building materials, are secured through separate subsequent site plan approval processes. This slide that shows the land use schedule and the zoning schedule helps to illustrate that the subject site outlined in red on both of these schedules is a significant part of the downtown intensification area, and therefore this proposal is an important part of implementing the town's vision for the downtown area through intensification and the introduction of a mix of uses within these intensification areas.
My name is Drew Sinclair. I'm one of the founding partners and principals at SVN Architects. We've been working with Castle Point Numa for several months on trying to develop a vision for how the lands at the intersection of Mountain and Elm in central Grimsby will contribute to the ongoing revitalization of the downtown core, but also in trying to help Castle Point Numa envision how this site might play a role in the ongoing evolution of the cultural landscape of the downtown center and also the post-carbon future of these lands within the larger escarpment landscape. Our work always begins with a thorough investigation in both the physical and cultural characteristics of the sites where we're working. This slide shows a 500-meter radius around the property at the intersection of Mountain and Elm. That 500-meter radius equates to roughly a 5-minute walking distance from the site. And you can clearly see that a large amount of sensitive landscape, in this case the Niagara Escarpment, and cultural landscape and commercial landscape, in this case the historic corridor along Main Street, the traditional Main Street in downtown Grimsby, they fall within immediate proximity to the site. Both of those proximities will inform our approach going forward. The triangle formed by Mountain Street, Main Street, and Elm Street tells us a lot about what we need to respond to when trying to introduce a new building and a new building type to the downtown area in Grimsby. Each street has its own physical characteristics and its own animations. Mountain Street has obviously the connection with the escarpment and that predominant view, that green wall that emerges to the immediate south of the site. Main Street is replete with many historic buildings that give it character, but also help to animate and help to create a viable context within which most of the commercial activity within Grimsby takes place. Elm Street is something quite different. Elm Street has both high points, where it touches the commercial streets, and low points, which are in a way what gives it its character, where it meets up against the existing stable neighborhoods. Zooming into the site itself, we have a view taken from Mountain Street looking towards the property. You can see two of the most important heritage elements within the core. On the left, the Woolverton House, and on the right, the historic church we now know as Woolverton Hall. The two buildings are situated an almost perfect distance apart to create a natural courtyard. When introducing a new architectural type to an important historic site like this, it's critical that the elements of interface where the two buildings come together are thoughtfully composed. In this case, what we're very interested in looking at is how a new contemporary element, a modern addition to the historic Woolverton House and a modern addition to the church can create a ribbon of animation continuous along the base of the buildings, animated by cafes, hospitality uses, new multi-program uses within the church hall, ultimately townhouses and new types of residential living at grade, and more than anything, a well-orchestrated public entry point to each of the buildings. It's important when trying to understand how to best marry historic forms with new contemporary architecture to look at examples of where this has been done well elsewhere. Deer Park United Church in Toronto turned itself inside out. The historic sanctuary became a major public open space, animated on all sides by restaurants and cafes. The old post office in central Cambridge in historic Galt became a new public library, a bookless public library, where the most technologically advanced portions of the space, the reading rooms at the base of the building, were exhibited as glass ribbons. You can see in the middle image here. The Niagara Falls History Museum takes a similar approach in trying to contrast the historic building with its contemporary addition, but using the same material palette, in this case limestone and wood, the same materials used in the historic building, but used in a contemporary way to create that point of reference. You can clearly see that they're related. Coming back to our site at the intersection of Mountain and Elm, you can now clearly see how the historic buildings frame that natural courtyard, that plaza space fronting onto Mountain Street. The new contemporary building sits well back from Mountain and forms a natural backdrop to that plaza. It has a more modest frontage onto Elm Street, and you can see how the north-south axis of the building terraces or steps down towards the single-family homes still located on the south side of Elm. The new building takes its cues from historic Woolverton Hall and the Woolverton House by setting back from the property lines enough to create usable outdoor spaces along all its edges. Those public spaces are further animated by the location of the entrances into the building. Along Mountain Street, you see the primary entrance into the residential building at the north edge, right in the center block. You see the entrance into the restaurant and cafe within the historic Woolverton House, and the primary entrance into the multi-purpose venue Woolverton Hall on the south side of the proposed plaza space. Along Elm Street, there's further animation with the primary lobby entrance into the multi-purpose venue as well as additional retail space. And along the east side of the building, where a pedestrian mews would actually allow for public access into the rear courtyard of the building, and furthermore into the traditional entry point into Balsam Lane from the west, we see townhouses that front directly onto that public mews. A few familiar images to help you understand what the central plaza space off of Mountain Street might look like. You're probably familiar with the Trias Winery and Restaurant in Niagara on the lake, and the courtyard shape of the plaza that informs the outdoor dining space. The historic post office in Thorold went through a rejuvenation a couple of years ago that included the addition of accessibility features across its front. And you can see how the landscape architecture, the accessible ramp, further animates the historic building and creates the accessible function that's so critical and necessary in a contemporary building. Again, the Deer Park United Church, which we spoke about earlier, turned itself inside out, and the historic edges of that building actually define the edges of the major public space. We're very interested in how marrying an effective landscape approach, the use of new trees and vegetation, accessibility features such as ramps, but ultimately usable outdoor spaces like plazas and patios can all create an amazing public venue along Mountain Street. The inner courtyard at the rear of the site has a very different character. It's both an active landscape for use by both residents and surrounding neighbors, and a passive landscape where we can try to reintroduce historic landscape types to this site. You can see a few examples. We're looking at international examples like the wood-housing Seestadt Aspern in Vienna, Austria, where historic grass plantings that hadn't existed in central Austria or in central Vienna for years were reintroduced on this site in order to recreate elements of a historic landscape. Or the Carly Living example in Berlin, Germany, where the landscape is productive, where residents can grow vegetables and fruits that are of use in their daily lives. Going inside the building now, we can have a look at one of the most important public elements of the whole program. The historic church building at the southwest corner of the property, now Woolverton Hall, began its rejuvenation several years ago with Castle Point Numa's installation of a commercial kitchen and establishment of a partnership with the Grimsby Benevolent Fund to run social service programming, food service programming out of the building. The intent is for that space to keep its community spirit, to maintain its function as a community hub, and continue to be available for community use programming, for food programming, and for music programming going forward. To the east of Woolverton Hall is a mid-block mews that connects north off of Elm Street into the inner courtyard of the project and ultimately further north towards Balsam Lane and the public parking in the mid-block. Along its western edge, along the east side of the new building, will be a series of townhouses with front doors and front gardens that relate directly to that mews. We're carrying on the tradition of pedestrian connections from the main streets into the inner block that have always existed in Grimsby and are numerous along the Main Street section between Mountain and Elm. Those townhouses make up a portion of the 6,400 square meters of proposed residential space on this site. The balance of that made up by apartment units and the amenity that will serve the residents. In addition to the residential area, we are proposing 333 square meters of non-residential use that includes the Woolverton Hub programming, but also food services and retail programming along Mountain and Elm Streets. There are 90 proposed parking spaces, all completely enclosed within the building, in addition to 45 bicycle parking spaces that will be available for both the commercial uses and the residential uses. The new building is much more than just its statistics, though. It is, in fact, a set of relationships between the two historic forms, Woolverton House and Woolverton Hall, and the new contemporary building, but also the new contemporary building and its surrounding neighbors. You can see how the building transitions both to Main Street to the left of this image, to the north, and Elm Street to the south. The building also forms a very important relationship with its landscape, with Mountain Street in the fore of this image and Elm Street to the right. The courtyard in front will be the primary point of animation, the thing that defines its relationship with the town, where many of the town residents will experience this building is in the cafe, in the spill-out space, in the space between Woolverton Hall and Woolverton House. It's those spaces where those relationships are being formed that we're exploring now. This is a very early image. Obviously, there's no architecture here yet. It's just a massing. But very soon, we'll be showing you more refined images of what's coming to Grimsby. Exploring those relationships further and moving clockwise around the slide, what we're trying to understand now is how the architecture of the historic buildings can inform the quality of the plaza, can inform the landscape approach to this site, how to make sure those spaces are both wonderful and usable. We're trying to understand how the interface between the historic structure and the contemporary structure melds, how that relationship defines something that is greater than the two on their own. The inner courtyard is something we're trying to explore as a space that's both public and private, that brings something new to Grimsby that doesn't currently exist there. And in the context of Woolverton Hub, trying to imagine how that community space, both inside and outside, can bring an amenity to the entire community in the form of food, music, and programming. The Townhouse Mews is a new type of living. It's something that doesn't currently exist in Grimsby. A small scale of street in the form of the Mews, new types of frontage with regards to the front doors onto the Mews and the gardens that support them. The architecture will take its cues from the surrounding landscape, finding references both in the limestone of the escarpment, but also the way vegetation grows across the rock. The architecture will also pay homage to the historic traditions of masonry, stone, and wood within the community, and ultimately intend to contribute towards the best post-carbon future for this land. So today we're at the very beginning of this process. We're still in the process of confirming key project objectives. You've heard today where we are with regards to our preliminary concept design and how it's evolving to respond to both landscape, contextual, community, and project objectives. We still need to complete the schematic design and coordination process and ultimately make a submission for a zoning bylaw amendment for this site. That will result in further comments or response from town staff. It will also require that we speak directly to members of the community through that process. We're very much looking forward to that open forum where we can discuss this project together. In the meantime, we would appreciate receiving your feedback on our proposed concept. Please email us at grimsby@castlepointnuma.com with your thoughts and any questions you might have. Thanks so much.